Hey, what's up guys? Nate here. Welcome back to another Sonic Academy video. So we're at the end of another year and I want to take this opportunity to take a look at 5 of my top plugins that I've picked up this year. So this is my personal selection. These are plugins that I've either had the most fun with over the last 12 months or that are making their way into pretty much every single project that I work in my regular workflow. We've got 3 effects and 2 synths that we're going to be taking a look at. The first being an EQ plugin from Sony Oxford, that is Claro. Now Claro doesn't sound different to any other equalizers out there. It's a digital EQ, although they do tout the EQs as sounding similar to sort of Neve EQs. It is a clean EQ, it's not really a character thing or analog modeled EQ. But the thing that really struck me about Claro and why it's found its way into pretty much every single project that I do these days is the workflow, which for me is pretty inspired. So we'll just bring up a instance of Claro in this project I'm working on and take a look at the interface. So when you load it up the first time, you're kind of greeted with this simplified screen, and I really love this. This is kind of how EQ should work in my mind. This is the producing tab, which is kind of where you start just shaping your sounds. This is where you mold the tone to make things balance in the mix a little bit better, and it's broad strokes EQ, which is something that a lot of people kind of don't do. They get stuck into the tiny little adjustments first when you should be balancing sounds like this as a broad strokes thing. Now by default it's got auto gain on, which is fantastic. It doesn't add any volume, so you can level match your stuff in a mix and still adjust the tone by weighting it either towards the low end, the mid-range, whatever, but keeping the levels straight. You've also got the ability to mix the width as well. This is sort of MS encoded stuff, so you can bring out the stereo as well. So all of this is available in other EQs, but I really like the form factor that they've put it in here. Aside from that, they've also very conveniently labeled stuff a little bit more descriptively rather than just giving you the frequency readouts, which you have here. But it's very quick to see rumble and weight. You can just kind of dial in something there. If you want a bit more weight on a bass line, you can do that, bring it up. You've got pre-selected frequencies here as well, which is always nice to have. It's something about analog EQs that I really like, where there is preset frequencies like this. It's just a very quick way to get to where you need to be. But now you can take this a step further and go into the tweak menu, which is where you can get a little bit more detailed. Here you can make fine adjustments. Once again, they've kind of labeled this really nicely for us. You can quickly see where there's mud, nasal sounds, presence definition all along the top. These are ones that you might want to boost. These are ones that you might want to cut down at the bottom. So it just makes a lot of sense the way it's laid out. And then the sort of cherry on top with this plugin for me is the inter-plugin connectivity. Now you can do this as well with other plugins like ProQ3, but it's a little bit more convoluted. What I love about this is once you have this plugin on every single channel, which is pretty much how I'm using it these days, you just click on mix and you'll see a list of every single instance in your project right up here, and you can instantly just select from comparisons. Obviously when you play this back now, you get a feed immediately to see whether there is, you'll see down in the bass line here, we can see there's a little bit of masking occurring, and we might want to take a look at that. And you can also adjust the EQs on other plugins. We're on the kick currently, and I can very simply add in nodes onto my bass EQ here to get rid of that masking, and you'll see if I come back down to the bass EQ now, those adjustments would have been made in this tweak page there from the kick channel. So just a super clever way and a very convenient way of working with EQ. I highly recommend you check this plugin out. It's become my go-to EQ for pretty much everything these days. So my second plugin in the list is again another EQ, and this is pretty much the first of its kind. I don't know of any plugin that works like this, and this is the SplitEQ from Eventide Audio. Now this is completely unique in the sense that you've got EQs that provide layers of, adjusting the EQs, and then you can adjust the EQ like per channel, either mid-side or left and right. This EQ gives you the ability to adjust either the transient or tonal qualities of a specific EQ band. And what this adds up to is probably one of the most interesting sort of problem-solving tools that you can get at the moment. There's a ton of interesting stuff that you can do for instance, when it comes to things like de-essing a vocal, typically you de-ess a vocal, it would pull out something around 8K dynamically, or traditional dynamic EQ would drop that whenever that threshold is exceeded. The problem with that is if you have tonal elements that exceed that threshold, it pulls that out too. Now, typically speaking, in a vocal, those errors and the little mouth clicks and S's and things like that are going to form up in the transient areas of the vocal. And this gives you the ability to, for instance, take a look at something around 8K, and you can actually pull out just the transient information from that vocal, and you leave all of the tonal stuff intact. Now, another interesting way to use this, for example, is if you wanted to EQ a percussive instrument like a kick drum, for example, without sort of overextending the bottom end. If we wanted to get a bit of punch, we could dial in EQ just for the transient elements. So yeah, we can just grab our transient section. We'll do it with a bell filter over here instead. And let's play back our kick. And we could actually reduce the tonal elements there as well. And now our EQ is acting a bit like a transient shaper in this regard. So there's a ton of stuff that you can do with this, even quite creative things like panning your transients from a signal to one side and keeping the tonal elements on another, thereby separating them completely. There's some really, really interesting ground that you can cover with this plugin. And like I said, I don't know of anything that does this. The other one that you might want to check out from Eventide, if you're into this kind of thing, is their Physion plugin, which gives you sort of like a multi-effect, but also with the ability to separate the tonal elements from the transient stuff and apply different effects to them. But in this case, where it's applied to an EQ plugin like this, it really is a very, very clever little piece of kit, this. And like I said, it's a surgical tool, and a very smart one at that. Right, so the next effect I want to take a look at is Devious Machine's Infiltrator. I've had so much fun with this plugin this year. It's a multi-effect, it's sort of an envelope automation window, and then on top of that, it's a sequence as well, so you can sequence different scenes of automation for each of the effects that you're using to create quite complex sounding effects. It can be anything from a really simple filter to an auto panner to a reverb. It's got a pretty aggressive sounding compressor built into it, which I find really useful in some cases with drums and so on. And then all the way to complete sonic mayhem when you have these complex sequences loaded up. Playing back something now, we can just go into something like the repeats category. So there's some pretty extreme examples that I just played there, but like I said, a little bit of finessing this thing, and it can be as subtle as you want it to be, but at the same time you can get these wild sort of glitchy stuff, very much like kind of D-Blues glitch or Sugar Bytes Effectrix. But I think this one for me, there's a lot more interesting stuff going on here as opposed to those. You've got up to 10 different effects here, everything ranging from an array of filters to frequency shifters, decimator, pitch shifter, reverb, distortion, gain, delay, loopers, FM, formant, phase, EQ, reverb, pan, ring mod, and comb filters. So yeah, this one definitely, this is a no-brainer. It's a fantastic sounding plugin, super popular. We've done a walkthrough of this at Sonic Academy as well, so I recommend you go check that out. This is one that should be on your to-buy list as well. So the first instrument in my list this year is not a plugin that was released this year, but they did release a brand new update for it, and this is Falcon 2.5 from UVI. Now, it's no secret that I'm a massive fan of Falcon. It's my go-to instrument for sort of sampling and it's more complex sound design work. It sounds fantastic. It's got so many cool features. It's one of those synths that kind of do almost anything you throw at it. And they really kind of knocked it out of the park with the 2.5 update this year. They added in a new filter, a really, really great sounding analog filter based on the MS-20, which is gorgeous, and a ton of other features as well. But for me, the highlights in the 2.5 update were the inclusion of a bunch of sequences and some sequences that I've kind of never seen before, some super creative stuff. Things like the rain sequencer, there's a probability sequencer, they added in Bernoulli gates. There's some really, really clever Euclidean stuff, both for chords and for drum sounds as well. I was really hoping they would add VST3 compatibility to this so that we can get a MIDI out. Unfortunately, we didn't get that, but what they did give as well is a set of tools for recording MIDI outputs as well. So aside from using these inside your own patches inside of Falcon, you can actually record these sequences and export them as MIDI files and play back other synths with them as well. And they really are quite inspired and very, very cool for generating new ideas. We'll take a listen to one or two of the presets from this. And there you have it. I've had a ton of fun with this year, especially these sequences, as I said. So I would definitely go check this out. It's just such a great synth to have this, and as a sampler as well. Fantastic tool to add to your arsenal. So my final pick for this year is going to be VCV Rack 2, and that is the Pro version from VCV. Finally, they've given us a VST-enabled plugin, so you can run this inside of your DAW now without any hiccups and without any complex routing and stuff like you had to do before. They've also addressed a bunch of stuff as far as patching it now. There's a lot of easy things that you can do, like highlighting multiple modules and saving those as a preset with their patching intact, so you can actually bring in selections of modules, like create an entire synth voice and save that as a preset and bring that into bigger modular patches as well. I own Cherry Audio's Voltage Modular, which I love for the ease of use. I also have Softtube Modular, which I love the sound of, but I have a lot of issues with how that functions. It's a little bit clunky, the user interface at times. VCV Rack for me falls squarely in the middle of that. It's got a lot of functionality now, which kind of makes it easier to use, like Voltage does, but yet it's still got some of the classic modules that I really love about Softtube's Modular. And on top of that, the module selection inside of VCV Rack is pretty much second to none. There are thousands and thousands of modules that you can check out here. And in addition to that, a lot of the modules that you can actually pick up are from actual hardware developers. And quite often these are digital oscillators, like the Audible Instruments, which is actually the mutable instrument stuff. This is based on the actual code from the hardware modules. So it's pretty much same as having these as hardware Eurorack modules. And also on top of this, if you do have a hardware modular rack, there are some modules from Expert Sleepers which are designed to help you interface with your hardware rack as well, and you can basically add onto your hardware rack with VCV in software and get them to talk to one another. There's also this nifty little dark mode which has been included now, where you can turn down the lights and have your sequences running, which is kind of cool. It's just a gimmick that, but I do like that. Yeah, so I've had a ton of fun with this, and it's kind of my go-to modular at the moment for when I'm wanting to do modular stuff. There's a little patch that I've put together, using some of the Audible Instruments, some sequencing from the permutation, the grayscale modules. So kind of just a basic sort of generative patch that I got going there. So some of the modules I recommend you guys check out. And by the way, you can still get VCV Rack as a free version. You just won't get the plugin. What I would suggest is checking out, I probably have way too much installed here currently, but the Valley modules are really, really cool. Some of the stuff from Volt, especially if you like quite aggressive sounds, there's some really gnarly oscillators and filters in here. This is based on the 4MS, quite a weird module this, but also a lot of fun. I would suggest you pick up the Bog Audio stuff. Is great just for utilities. I like these sort of smaller modules, the micro modules of theirs. Definitely grab the Audible Instruments. You'll find all the classics like Braids, Plats, Clouds, and a bunch of other ones in here. And again, based on the actual hardware. Bafaka, these are great modules as well, some fantastic stuff in here. I also like some of these sequencing modules from Impromptu, although again, I've got way too many installed. I'm just kind of working my way through these to see which are the ones that I gel with the most. Cool, so that pretty much wraps up my list of plugins for 2021. These are my personal favorites that I've been using loads. I'm sure that you guys have got your own personal favorites, and there's a ton of other plugins that are worth checking out. In that case, please let us know. Tell us down below what your top 5 were, what's impressed you the most this year, and what do you recommend that people should pick up from 2021 as far as plugins are concerned. Right, I will catch you guys again soon right here at Sonic Academy. Till then, take care, have a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. See you soon.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!